He wasn't a politician. He didn't lead an army, but he controlled a nation with money, guns, and silence. El Chapo didn't just sell drugs. He built an empire and left a scar America still carries. He wasn't born in a palace, nor in the shadows. He was born in the red, dusty mountains of Sinaloa, Mexico, where drugs weren't a crime but a family tradition. His real name was Joaquin Archivaldo Guzman Loera, but the world would come to know him by a single name, El Chapo, the Shorty. Born in 1957 in a poverty-stricken village called La Tuna, El Chapo grew up in a mud brick house with no electricity, no clean water, no future. His father, a local opium farmer, beat him often. His mother prayed quietly, unable to stop the blows. To his father, Joaquin was worthless, too small, too weak, too soft for the harsh mountains of Sinaloa. But the boy survived. And then, he thrived. By the age of 8, he was already growing poppy plants, learning how to scrape opium resin, how to make a sail. He didn't play with toys. He learned how to hide drugs in sacks of corn, how to spot a cop from a mile away, how to lie with a straight face. While other kids were still learning the alphabet, Chapo was learning the drug trade, not in a classroom, but out in the fields, under the sun, with men who would later become narco legends. At 15, after being kicked out by his father, he left home for good. No money, no roof. Only one thing kept him going: ambition. He found work under Hector El Güero Palma, a rising drug trafficker. Chapo didn't come with a gun or an army or reputation, but he had something more dangerous: loyalty, silence, and zero fear. He drove trucks across borders. He hid cocaine in tires, under seats, even inside statues of saints. He bribed police. He studied logistics. He learned how to vanish without a trace. He didn't talk much. He just showed up and got things done. By the early 1980s, he had caught the attention of the biggest drug lord in Mexico at the time, Miguel Ángel Félix Gallardo, the godfather of the Guadalajara cartel. This was Chapo's gateway into hell. Gallardo didn't need another thug. He needed a strategist, and El Chapo proved he could be exactly that. He developed new routes using airplanes and airdrops. He built a multi-layered transport network that confused even US DEA agents. Chapo wasn't just another wheel in the cartel's machine. He was the engineer behind the machine. While other traffickers flaunted their money and mistresses, El Chapo quietly bought loyalty. He built homes for villagers, paid hospital bills for the sick, gave food to the poor. In Sinaloa, he wasn't seen as a criminal. He was seen as a Robin Hood. But make no mistake, he was not merciful. If you messed up a shipment, if you talked too much, if you crossed the wrong line, you disappeared. Quietly, permanently. No witnesses, no warnings, and no one dared speak his name out loud. In the mountains of Mexico, El Chapo's word was law, and that law was absolute. From a dirt-poor village boy rejected by his father, he had risen to become a man respected and feared by killers. But this was just the beginning. Because a real drug lord doesn't just move kilos, he builds an empire. And in the next episode, you'll witness how El Chapo didn't just lead a cartel. He rewrote the rules of the entire game. One brick of cocaine at a time, one bloody deal after another, one grave for every betrayal. Under one name, the law of Chapo. He didn't just move drugs, he moved fear. When Miguel Ángel Félix Gallardo, the godfather of Mexican drug trafficking, was arrested in 1989, his empire didn't fall. It shattered. And each shard became a new cartel, but only one of them would rise above the rest. And at its head was a short, silent man with a terrifying ability to vanish and rebuild. El Chapo. He wasn't the loudest, he wasn't the richest, but he was the most ruthless strategist in the room. In the early 1990s, El Chapo took control of a faction in the Northwest, what would soon be known as the Sinaloa cartel. At first, it was small, but Chapo didn't need numbers. He needed control of the routes, because in the drug business, routes are everything. Cocaine is just powder, but the path it travels on, that's the real power. While his enemies fought each other in flashy gun battles, El Chapo went underground, literally. He built a network of tunnels beneath the US-Mexico border. Not just shallow trenches, but fully engineered passages, with rail systems, air circulation, and lights. To the DEA, it was genius. To El Chapo, it was just step one. Through these tunnels, he moved thousands of kilos of cocaine, meth, and marijuana into California, Arizona, and Texas. Faster, cheaper, undetectable. His rivals were still paying smugglers. Chapo? He was building a drug subway. But tunnels were only part of his game. He also bought fleets of private jets, submarines, and semi-trucks hidden in plain sight. He paid off border agents. He even infiltrated Mexican airports, loading cargo planes with dope under the nose of customs officers. He didn't just ship drugs. He shipped them with the efficiency of Amazon and the secrecy of the CIA. As his wealth grew, so did his paranoia. He never slept in the same place 2 nights in a row. He built fortresses in the mountains, protected by private armies and villagers loyal to him. He used encrypted radios, burner phones, and a network of lookouts called halcones, hawks, stationed in every village. If a stranger stepped into town, El Chapo knew, before they even got out of the car. The Mexican government tried to catch him. So did the Americans. But every time they got close, Chapo vanished into the Sierra Madre, a mountain range where no law dared follow, only his own. And when rivals tried to challenge him, he didn't hesitate. In 1993, at the Guadalajara airport, a gunfight broke out between Chapo's men and a rival cartel. A cardinal, a high-ranking Catholic priest, was killed in the crossfire. The government blamed Chapo. He claimed it was mistaken identity. It didn't matter, because now he wasn't just a drug lord. He was public enemy number 1. He was arrested that same year in Guatemala and extradited to Mexico. But even behind bars, he ran his empire like a CEO. Inside prison, he had a private cell, a rotating roster of guards he hand-picked, even a secret tunnel system underneath his cell block. He bribed wardens. He threw parties. He conducted meetings with lawyers who carried his orders to the outside world. The Sinaloa cartel didn't shrink. It exploded. By the early 2000s, the cartel had become a multinational syndicate, operating in over 50 countries. It supplied 80% of the cocaine entering the United States. Then came the moment that sealed his legend, January 19th, 2001. While Mexican authorities slept, El Chapo vanished. He escaped prison, reportedly inside a laundry cart. Others say he walked out with the help of over 70 bribed officials. However he did it, one thing was clear. The kingpin was back in the wild, and more dangerous than ever. After his escape, Chapo rebuilt his cartel into a shadow government. He controlled not just drugs, but banks, judges, police commanders, and even politicians. He launched an all-out narco war against rival cartels, especially the Zetas, a paramilitary gang founded by former special forces. Entire cities became war zones. Bodies hung from bridges, messages written in blood. Through it all, El Chapo remained invisible. Only his orders were seen. He had become more than a man. He was a ghost, a myth, a multi-billion-dollar specter haunting 2 nations. And yet, he still craved respect. He built zoos, mansions, even a private ranch where he hosted fiestas with politicians, singers, and beauty queens. He wasn't just a criminal. He wanted to be a king. But the higher you rise, the more visible you become. And Chapo's next downfall would be the most cinematic of them all. Because while he controlled tunnels, borders, and guns, He couldn't resist one thing: fame. He didn't just build a drug empire, he built a state within a state. When Miguel Ángel Félix Gallardo, the godfather of Mexican drug trafficking, was arrested in 1989, his empire didn't fall. It shattered, and each shard became a new cartel. But only one of them would rise above the rest. And at its head was a short, silent man with a terrifying ability to vanish and rebuild: El Chapo. He wasn't the loudest, he wasn't the richest, but he was the most ruthless strategist in the room. In the early 1990s, El Chapo took control of a faction in the Northwest, what would soon be known as the Sinaloa cartel. At first, it was small, but Chapo didn't need numbers. He needed control of the routes, because in the drug business, routes are everything. Cocaine is just powder, but the path it travels on, that's the real power. While his enemies fought each other in flashy gun battles, El Chapo went underground, literally. He built a network of tunnels beneath the US-Mexico border. Not just shallow trenches, but fully engineered passages, with rail systems, air circulation, and lights. To the DEA, it was genius. To El Chapo, it was just step one. Through these tunnels, he moved thousands of kilos of cocaine, meth, and marijuana into California, Arizona, and Texas. Faster, cheaper, undetectable. His rivals were still paying smugglers. Chapo, he was building a drug subway. But tunnels were only part of his game. He also bought fleets of private jets, submarines, and semi-trucks hidden in plain sight. He paid off border agents. He even infiltrated Mexican airports, loading cargo planes with dope under the nose of customs officers. He didn't just ship drugs. He shipped them with the efficiency of Amazon and the secrecy of the CIA. As his wealth grew, so did his paranoia. He never slept in the same place 2 nights in a row. He built fortresses in the mountains, protected by private armies and villagers loyal to him. He used encrypted radios, burner phones, and a network of lookouts called halcones, hawks, stationed in every village. If a stranger stepped into town, El Chapo knew, before they even got out of the car. The Mexican government tried to catch him, so did the Americans. But every time they got close, Chapo vanished into the Sierra Madre, a mountain range where no law dared follow, only his own. And when rivals tried to challenge him, he didn't hesitate. In 1993, at the Guadalajara airport, a gunfight broke out between Chapo's men and a rival cartel. A cardinal, a high-ranking Catholic priest, was killed in the crossfire. The government blamed Chapo. He claimed it was mistaken identity. It didn't matter, because now he wasn't just a drug lord. He was public enemy number 1. He was arrested that same year in Guatemala and extradited to Mexico. But even behind bars, he ran his empire like a CEO. Inside prison, he had a private cell, a rotating roster of guards he handpicked, even a secret tunnel system underneath his cell block. He bribed wardens. He threw parties. He conducted meetings with lawyers, who carried his orders to the outside world. The Sinaloa cartel didn't shrink. It exploded. By the early 2000s, the cartel had become a multinational syndicate, operating in over 50 countries. It supplied 80% of the cocaine entering the United States. Then came the moment that sealed his legend, January 19th, 2001. While Mexican authorities slept, El Chapo vanished. He escaped prison, reportedly inside a laundry cart. Others say he walked out with the help of over 70 bribed officials. However he did it, one thing was clear. The kingpin was back in the wild, and more dangerous than ever. After his escape, Chapo rebuilt his cartel into a shadow government. He controlled not just drugs, but banks, judges, police commanders, and even politicians. He launched an all-out narco war against rival cartels, especially the Zetas, a paramilitary gang founded by former special forces. Entire cities became war zones. Bodies hung from bridges, messages written in blood. Through it all, El Chapo remained invisible. Only his orders were seen. He had become more than a man. He was a ghost, a myth, a multi-billion-dollar specter haunting two nations. And yet, he still craved respect. He built zoos, mansions, even a private ranch where he hosted fiestas with politicians, singers, and beauty queens. He wasn't just a criminal. He wanted to be a king. But the higher you rise, the more visible you become. And Chapo's next downfall would be the most cinematic of them all, because while he controlled tunnels, borders, and guns, he couldn't resist one thing: fame. He didn't just build a drug empire. He built a state within a state. By 2001, El Chapo had already become a ghost, an invisible architect of cocaine pipelines, armed militias, and billion-dollar deals, hidden behind layers of bribes, bullets, and fear. But this ghost was about to be caught. The 1993 shootout that accidentally killed Cardinal Juan Jesus Posadas Ocampo at the Guadalajara airport had changed everything. Chapo could no longer operate in the shadows. His face was in every newspaper, his name on every government blacklist. So, like a predator sensing danger, he ran. He crossed the southern border into Guatemala, thinking it would buy him time. It didn't. On June 9, 1993, Guatemalan soldiers, tipped off by Mexican intelligence, surrounded a modest hideout in Tapachula. Inside was Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, stunned, handcuffed, and quickly extradited back to Mexico. No violence, no shootout. It was almost anticlimactic. But what came next would become legend. Almoloya de Juarez, a maximum security prison nicknamed La Palma, was designed for men like El Chapo. Dangerous, untouchable, unbreakable. Steel doors, concrete walls, 24/7 surveillance. And yet, from day one, Chapo wasn't a prisoner. He was a general in a new command center. He bribed guards, warden, prison staff, even other inmates. He had visitors. He had his own cook, a stocked refrigerator, a cell phone, and luxuries other prisoners only dreamed of. He ran the Sinaloa cartel from inside the walls, issuing orders through coded messages, lawyers, and even laundry deliveries. Every brick in the prison that was meant to hold him, he turned into part of his empire. For 8 years, the Mexican government thought it had El Chapo locked down. But on the night of January 19, 2001, as the country watched football on TV, he disappeared. Official reports claimed he escaped hidden in a laundry cart, smuggled through 14 security checkpoints, aided by at least 70 guards and staff, all bought with cash. Others say he simply walked out the front door. No alarms, no gunshots, no chaos. By the time authorities realized he was gone, Chapo was already halfway into the Sierra Madre Mountains, riding in the back of a pickup, laughing, free. That escape shattered Mexico's image of control. It proved what everyone feared. Money buys silence. Fear buys loyalty. And Chapo had both. In the public eye, he became untouchable, a criminal folk hero. Songs were written about him, narco-corridos, ballads of a man who outsmarted the government. He was no longer just a kingpin. He was a myth. For the next 13 years, Chapo ruled from the shadows. No mugshots, no sightings, only rumors. He built entire drug corridors across Central and South America using cartel alliances, warlords, and corrupt officials. He oversaw trafficking routes that stretched from Colombia to Chicago and money laundering networks that flowed through Panama, the Cayman Islands, and Hong Kong. He used encryption, satellite phones, GPS trackers, and dead drops. He moved through villages on foot, sometimes disguised as a farmer, a priest, even a migrant. The US DEA called him the most powerful drug trafficker in the world. But to the people in Sinaloa, he was the man who built roads, paid for funerals, delivered medicine, and fed the poor. They didn't protect him because they were afraid. They protected him because to them, he was the only one who delivered. But even ghosts leave footprints. And El Chapo was starting to slip. Behind the scenes, American and Mexican intelligence were tracking him relentlessly. Wiretaps, drones, informants, and then a mistake. In early 2014, El Chapo started getting careless. He visited one of his many wives, too often. Used the same phone, too long. Trusted one bodyguard, too much. And this time, he wasn't hiding in the jungle. He was in a luxury beachfront condo in Mazatlan, one of the most heavily watched cities in Mexico. On February 22, 2014, at 4:40 a.m., Mexican Marines stormed the building. No shots were fired. No one resisted. There he was, in a dirty tank top, just out of bed, the world's most wanted man, back in custody after 13 years on the run. The world celebrated. Politicians claimed victory. But anyone who truly knew El Chapo was skeptical, because they'd seen this movie before. And so had he. Because for El Chapo Guzman, prison wasn't a punishment. It was just another temporary setback. A puzzle to be solved, a system to manipulate, a door waiting to be opened. And the next escape? It would make the laundry cart look like a magic trick at a birthday party. He walked into prison like a man checking into a hotel, and walked out like a ghost in the night. Prison walls are meant to keep people in. But for Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, they were just an inconvenience, a temporary pause between empires. And this time, when he escaped, he didn't climb over anything. He went under it. Altiplano Prison, the most secure facility in Mexico. Steel-reinforced concrete, motion detectors, cameras in every hallway, armed guards watching around the clock. No phones, no contact, no excuses. After his arrest in 2014, the government promised, this time, he's not getting out. They didn't understand. El Chapo wasn't a prisoner. He was an engineer of exits. From day one, he studied the prison like a blueprint. His people on the outside began surveying the land, buying property, smuggling tools, bribing contractors. All while El Chapo sat in his cell, silent, calculating, waiting. Every morning, he showered in the same corner. Every evening, he paced in the same square. And every night, guards watched, but saw nothing. Until one night, they saw nothing at all. Because he was gone. July 11th, 2015. A quiet Saturday night. The camera in his cell showed Chapo walking to the shower, disappearing behind a waist-high wall. 30 minutes passed. Then an hour. No movement. By the time guards entered the cell, all they found was an empty stall and a hole in the floor. A hole, precisely 50 centimeters wide, cut beneath the shower, the one place the camera couldn't see. Below it, a ladder descending into the dark. But this wasn't just any escape tunnel. It was a masterpiece. Over 1 mile long, the tunnel led from El Chapo's shower to a small, nondescript warehouse in the countryside. Inside the tunnel, electric lighting, ventilation pipes, steel rails, a modified motorcycle on tracks for quick transport. It was like something out of a war movie. But this wasn't Hollywood. This was real. And it had taken over a year to dig, right under the government's nose. By the time the authorities realized what had happened, El Chapo was already long gone, vanished into the night, back into the mountains. The embarrassment was global. How could the most dangerous man in the world escape from the most secure prison in Mexico again? The government launched raids, fired prison officials, arrested 20 guards, blamed each other. But none of it mattered. Chapo was free, and the legend only grew stronger. For months, he disappeared completely. No calls, no sightings, just rumors that he was in Guatemala, Honduras, even Argentina. Meanwhile, the DEA and Mexican Marines began the largest manhunt in modern cartel history. But Chapo was calm. He felt invincible. And like every man who believes he's untouchable, he made a fatal mistake. October 2015. A Mexican actress named Kate del Castillo received a message. It was from El Chapo himself. He admired her work, loved how she portrayed outlaws with honor. He wanted to meet. He wanted to tell his story. He wanted a movie. Yes, El Chapo Guzman, the most wanted fugitive on earth, wanted to become a film icon. So he reached out to someone else, Sean Penn, the American actor. What happened next was surreal. A secret meeting was arranged in the jungles of Sinaloa. Sean Penn and Kate del Castillo were flown in. There, in a safe house, surrounded by gunmen, they met Chapo, who smiled, poured drinks, and posed for selfies. He spoke about family, fame, and legacy. He even joked, "If I didn't run drugs, someone else would." The interview made global headlines, but behind the scenes, intelligence agencies were watching. The communications, the flight paths, the leaked location, it was enough. The walls were closing in. January 8th, 2016. The town, Los Mochis, Sinaloa. Before dawn, Mexican Marines surrounded a house. Inside, Chapo, his top bodyguard, and a handful of gunmen. A brutal firefight erupted. Grenades exploded. Bullets tore through walls. Chapo and his bodyguard escaped through a hidden tunnel but surfaced too soon. They hijacked a car, but were caught on the road. No escape this time. No laundry cart, no tunnel, no legend. Just cold handcuffs and a convoy headed to prison. The world watched as he was flown back to Altiplano. But the Mexican government had learned its lesson. This time, they didn't take chances. They didn't wait. 1 year later, on January 19th, 2017, El Chapo was extradited to the United States. A 23-hour lockdown cell. No communication, no bribed guards, no holes in the floor. This time, the kingpin was truly caged. He escaped a fortress with a tunnel built like a subway, but in the end it was fame that betrayed him. By 2017, Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, the most powerful drug trafficker on earth, was no longer a ghost in the mountains. He was inmate number 899-14053 at the Metropolitan Correctional Center, Manhattan. Locked away in a 10 by 6 foot cell 23 hours a day. No phone calls, no visitors, no windows. Just fluorescent light, steel walls, and silence. The man who once ran a billion-dollar empire with whispered orders was now under 24/7 surveillance. Not even the rats in the walls could move without being seen. And still, he smiled. Because he knew the war wasn't over. It was just entering a new arena, a courtroom. United States versus Joaquin Guzman Loera, Federal Court, Brooklyn. Case number 09-CR-466. The charges, everything. Drug trafficking, conspiracy money laundering, weapons offenses, homicide, torture, kidnapping. In total, 17 counts. Facing life in prison, without parole. The trial would become the largest and most expensive federal criminal case in modern U.S. history. And the whole world was watching. Security was insane. The courtroom was turned into a fortress. Rooftop snipers, SWAT teams, explosive sniffing dogs. Every time El Chapo was transported, a caravan of armored vehicles shut down the Brooklyn Bridge. Snipers were posted, airspace was restricted. To the public, he was just another defendant. To the government, he was a national threat. But to his lawyers, he was a celebrity. The defense team portrayed Chapo as a scapegoat. They claimed he was a fall guy, the public face of a system far deeper than one man. They argued that corruption ran so high, the real criminals were protected by governments, politicians, and police generals. El Chapo was the face, they said. But someone else was pulling the strings. It was bold, it was dramatic, but it wasn't enough. Because the prosecution had something stronger: insiders. One by one, they walked into court. Former assassins, smugglers, pilots, accountants, even cartel lieutenants. They told stories that sounded like Narcos scripts, except this was real life. One man described how Chapo tortured rivals with live electricity. Another said he personally watched Chapo shoot a man in the head, then order the body dissolved in acid. A mistress-turned-witness revealed how Chapo ran drugs using custom-built submarines, disguised oil tankers, and even aircraft with hidden compartments. They called him smart, calculating, untouchable. They feared him, but now they testified against him. In exchange for lighter sentences, every witness was a nail in the coffin, and there were dozens. Then came the evidence: wiretaps in encrypted Spanish, GPS records of drug shipments, financial logs tracing billions of dollars in payments, photos, videos, handwritten ledgers. At one point, the courtroom played an intercepted call, Chapo ordering a hit, his voice calm, precise, deadly. The jury listened in silence. It wasn't a trial, it was an autopsy, and the body was El Chapo's legacy. The most shocking moment? A witness claimed that El Chapo once paid $100 million in bribes to former Mexican President Enrique Peña Nieto. The courtroom gasped. Mexico denied it, but the damage was done. This trial wasn't just about a drug lord. It was about how far the roots of corruption reached, from villages in Sinaloa to the presidential palace. For 3 months, the court became a theater of power, violence, and betrayal. Outside, reporters lined up before dawn. Inside, jurors sat with armed protection, hidden identities, and panic buttons beneath their chairs. Because even in chains, El Chapo was still terrifying. February 12, 2019, the verdict came in guilty on all 10 federal counts that went to jury: drug trafficking, organized crime, murder conspiracy, life in prison. The courtroom was still. Chapo didn't blink, didn't flinch, didn't speak. Just a half smile, as if he already knew. July 17, 2019. He was sentenced. Life without parole, plus 30 years. He was ordered to forfeit $12.6 billion, the estimated revenue of his cartel. The judge looked him in the eye and said, "Your day of reckoning has arrived." And with that, El Chapo Guzman, once the most powerful man in the drug world, was flown to ADX Florence, Colorado, the Supermax, the Alcatraz of the Rockies, where he now spends 23 hours a day in a concrete cell with no TV, no view, no voice, no escape. But even behind 1,000 walls, his story isn't over. Because where there is a void in power, someone always rises to fill it. He ruled with tunnels and terror, but in the end, his empire collapsed under its own weight. Brick by brick, corpse by corpse. When El Chapo was sentenced to life behind bars in 2019, many thought the Sinaloa cartel would collapse. A king was gone. Surely the kingdom would fall. But they were wrong, because Chapo didn't build a pyramid. He built a hydra, cut off one head and 2 more rise. The cartel didn't die. It adapted. And what rose in his place was something even more dangerous: a war for succession. The Sinaloa cartel was never just El Chapo. It was a multi-headed beast built on blood ties, strategic marriages, and regional fiefdoms. At the top were three major factions: Los Chapitos, El Chapo's sons Ismael El Mayo Zambada, the silent architect Aureliano El Guano Guzman, Chapo's older brother. Each held power. Each wanted more, and none were willing to back down. Raised in narco-luxury but baptized in violence, Chapo's sons had grown up inside the empire. Now, they wanted the throne. The most prominent, Ovidio Guzman Lopez, nicknamed El Raton, the Mouse, Ivan Archivaldo Guzman, Jesus Alfredo Guzman, Joaquin Guzman Lopez. They were young, flashy, reckless. They wore designer clothes, posted photos of pet tigers and gold-plated guns, traveled with convoys of armed SUVs and model girlfriends. But beneath the flash was real power. They controlled vast meth labs, fentanyl exports, and key smuggling routes into the U.S., and they were willing to fight for every inch of it. While the sons made noise, El Mayo stayed quiet. A veteran trafficker since the 1970s, Mayo had never spent a single night in prison. He didn't use phones. He didn't appear in photos. He ran his business the old-school way, through whispers, handshakes, and fear. When Chapo was arrested, Mayo kept the cartel stable. When the sons rose, he tolerated them until they overstepped. Some say he wanted peace. Others say he wanted everything. But one thing is clear. If the sons inherited the name, Mayo inherited the network. And wars aren't won with Instagram. They're won with guns and loyalty. Then there's Aureliano Guzman, a.k.a. El Guano, older, colder, and bloodthirsty. He stayed hidden in the Sierra Madre, commanding loyalty from hill tribes and veteran sicarios. While others fought over cities, El Guano kept control of the heartland, La Tuna, Badiraguato, the cradle of the cartel. He's not flashy, he's not modern, but his men are fierce, and his hatred for traitors is legendary. Even among criminals, Guano is whispered about with fear, and when war broke out among the factions, his guns were the first to speak. Since 2020, reports have emerged of internal violence: Los Chapitos versus Mayo, Guano versus Chapitos, Mayo's lieutenants turning rogue, gunfights in Culiacan, villages burned, highways shut down, bodies dumped with narco messages pinned to their chests. In October 2019, Mexican forces captured Ovidio Guzman, one of Chapo's sons. But what happened next shocked the world. After Ovidio was captured, Sinaloa erupted. Hundreds of cartel gunmen stormed the city of Culiacan, blocking roads, firing RPGs, and taking soldiers' families hostage. For hours, the city burned. Civilians hid in malls and under beds. The military, outgunned and surrounded, made a desperate choice. They let Ovidio go. The government said it was to protect civilian lives. The truth? The cartel showed the Mexican state who really holds power. In 2023, Ovidio was finally recaptured in a massive military operation. But the message had been sent. The sons weren't boys anymore. They were warlords. And their battle with El Mayo, El Guano, and the Mexican government continues. In the shadows, on the streets, and across borders. The Sinaloa cartel is no longer one beast. It's a federation of fragmented power, each arm trafficking fentanyl, meth, cocaine, and heroin across the globe. Despite El Chapo's life sentence, his influence remains engraved into the DNA of the organization. Because he didn't just build a cartel, he built a system, one that teaches how to move drugs faster, launder money better, and evade justice longer. In his absence, that system still runs, and the war for control still raging. The king is gone, but the kingdom endures, bloodier, richer, and more divided than ever. When the U.S. court ordered Joaquin El Chapo Guzman to forfeit $12.6 billion, the estimated profits of his drug empire, the number shocked the world. It was larger than the annual GDP of some countries. But there was one problem. When Chapo was captured, there was no fortune, no offshore accounts, no private islands, no vaults of gold, no properties in his name. Nothing. Just an aging man in a beige prison uniform, and a question that haunts law enforcement to this day. Where did all the money go? The answer lies not in one place, but in many. Not in one name, but in shadows. Because El Chapo didn't just move drugs, he moved money like smoke, impossible to hold, harder to track. From the beginning, Chapo understood the value of staying invisible. His name rarely appeared on anything. Instead, he built layers of trusted people, frontmen, lawyers, family members, and businessmen who moved cash for him like couriers of the underworld. Through them, billions passed through shell companies, casinos, real estate, and luxury goods. Ranches in Sinaloa, trucking companies in Sonora, homes in Cancun, all technically legal, all quietly financed by cocaine and heroin. When the financial system was too risky, Chapo turned to methods older than banking itself. He used hawala, an informal trust-based system for transferring funds that left no paper trail. A hawala broker in Culiacan could pass a message to one in Dubai or Istanbul, and the equivalent funds would be delivered to the recipient without any physical money ever crossing borders. No banks, no receipts, just invisible hands passing favors, debts, and silence. But Chapo didn't abandon the old ways either. He still trusted cash, the tangible kind. Pallets of US dollars were loaded into secret compartments in trucks, planes, and even shipments of produce. Millions of dollars were buried in barrels, hidden in safe houses, or melted into gold bricks and jewelry. Some were moved across the border, one backpack at a time. Every week, millions flowed south, not electronically, but in bundles, bags, and bribes. And the bribes were endless. To keep the empire alive, Chapo had to grease the system at every level, from low-level police officers to federal commanders, customs agents, military generals, judges, and allegedly, even a sitting president. One trial witness claimed Chapo paid $100 million directly to former President Enrique Peña Nieto. That wasn't business. That was insurance. And it wasn't an exception. It was routine. When you run an empire as large as his, corruption isn't a tactic. It's the operating system. But even this doesn't account for everything. The most chilling theory is that the money never left. It just changed names. After his arrest, Chapo's wife, Emma Coronel, continued living in luxury. Designer clothes, lavish vacations, access to everything, while claiming to own nothing. Many believe she, along with Los Chapitos, Chapo's sons who now run major arms of the cartel, inherited not just the power, but the keys to the vault, and not a literal vault. A network. Because Chapo didn't keep stacks of cash sitting in a cave. He invested in a system, one that still launders, still pays, still profits. One where money is no longer measured in dollars but in influence. How many soldiers you can arm, how many politicians you can buy, how many borders you can cross without being seen. The US government tried to recover assets. They froze accounts, seized properties, auctioned off homes, but what they captured was barely a fraction, a few million at most. The rest had evaporated into the machine, hidden in trusts, funneled through foreign banks, or passed down through generations in whispers and locked drawers. Some investigators estimate the real fortune wasn't $12 billion, but closer to $25 billion, accumulated over 3 decades and scattered across multiple continents. And the worst part? It's still active. Chapo's fortune didn't retire. It still buys guns for the Chapitos. It still fuels wars against rival cartels. It still funds meth labs, fentanyl exports, and corruption at every level of law enforcement. It pays to keep the cartel moving, just as he designed it. He may now sit in solitary confinement, 23 hours a day, inside the cold walls of Supermax, Colorado. But his money? It's still moving, still feeding the empire, still killing, quietly, efficiently, invisibly. Because Chapo didn't just build wealth, he built a self-sustaining engine of profit and blood. And even with the king gone, the machine runs on. The money didn't disappear. It transformed into silence, into power, into war. In the story of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, there is one figure who has always stood just off stage, silent, beautiful, smiling politely as the world whispered about her. Emma Coronel Aispuro, beauty queen, loyal wife, alleged accomplice. To some, she was the symbol of a woman standing by her man. To others, she was the bridge between a drug lord and the outside world. But beneath the glamour and the Instagram-perfect poses lay a woman raised in the same shadows as the cartel itself. Emma was born in 1989 in California, but raised in the rugged hills of Durango, Mexico, deep in the Golden Triangle, the birthplace of Mexican drug trafficking. Her father was Inés Coronel Barreras, a known associate of El Chapo. Her uncle, Ignacio Nacho Coronel, one of Chapo's top lieutenants. Trafficking wasn't something Emma learned later. It was her environment. By the time she was a teenager, she understood how power moved in Sinaloa, not through politics or law, but through family, loyalty, and silence. In 2007, at the age of 17, Emma competed in the Coffee and Guava Festival, a regional beauty contest in Canelas, Durango. It was a quiet, remote town, until one man showed up, Joaquin Guzman. Nearly 30 years her senior, he arrived surrounded by bodyguards, helicopters, and gifts. He came not just to attend the festival, but to claim the queen. That same year, Emma married him. They say the wedding was small, but the town was filled with guns. The girl who had once walked dirt roads in sandals was now married to the most wanted man in Mexico. In 2011, Emma gave birth to twin daughters in Los Angeles. That's right, the children of El Chapo were born on U.S. soil. Emma, still a U.S. citizen, crossed the border legally, checked into a hospital, and quietly gave birth to two girls who would carry dual citizenship. She listed unknown for the father on the birth certificates. She didn't have to say his name. Everyone already knew. Despite being married to the most hunted man on earth, Emma lived a strange kind of open secrecy. She appeared in public, posted on social media, granted interviews. In 2016, after Chapo's rearrest, she told the press, "He's not violent. He's a father, a good man. They're trying to destroy him." She wore designer clothing. She smiled for cameras. But all the while, authorities watched her carefully. Not because of what she said, but because of what they believed she was doing behind the scenes. By the time Chapo was on trial in Brooklyn in 2019, Emma was front row every day. She walked into court like a ghost in black, never crying, never flinching, always locking eyes with her husband as the world listened to stories of murder, torture, and poison. One witness claimed Emma had helped Chapo orchestrate his escape from prison, even helping smuggle him a GPS watch to coordinate the tunnel that led from beneath his cell to freedom. Another said she sat in cartel meetings, that she passed messages, that she arranged details with his sons, but she was never charged. She remained untouchable until she wasn't. February 22nd, 2021. Dulles International Airport, Virginia. Emma Coronel was arrested by the FBI as she stepped off a commercial flight. The charges? Conspiracy to distribute cocaine, meth, heroin, and marijuana. Plus, assisting in Chapo's escape and continuing his cartel communications while he was in U.S. custody. It was one of the most shocking turns in the saga. For years, she had been treated like an accessory, a passive player. But now, the U.S. government was calling her something else, a co-conspirator. In court, Emma was calm. She didn't protest. She didn't fight. And soon, she pled guilty to helping run the cartel, to helping her husband escape, to knowing exactly what she was part of. But her sentence shocked many. 3 years in prison, light compared to the life sentences handed to others. Too light, some believed. The whispers began again. She had cut a deal, cooperated, quietly, gave up names, routes, secrets, nothing confirmed. But in the underworld, even rumors can kill. Emma was released in 2023. After serving just 2 years in a California facility, she walked free, no press conference, no statement, just a silence almost as loud as the empire that made her. Today, her exact location is unknown. She lives under the radar, possibly under protection. The mother of Chapo's twin daughters. The woman who once wore Versace to court and walked among killers without blinking. To some, she's a pawn. To others, a queen pin. But one thing is certain. She knew everything. And she survived. She walked through fire in heels, with diamonds on her wrist and blood on her silence. After the fall of El Chapo, many believed the streets of Mexico would grow quieter. The king was gone. His trial was over. His empire scattered. But silence never came. Because in the vacuum left by one empire's fracture, another was already rising. Faster, meaner, and more brutal. Its name, CJNG, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel. And now, Mexico was no longer just bleeding. It was at war. For decades, the Sinaloa cartel operated like a multinational corporation, calculated, disciplined, and deeply entrenched. Its strength was its history. Its power lay in relationships, generations of corruption, and decades of experience smuggling cocaine, meth, and heroin. But CJNG was different. It was born in chaos, and it thrived in it. Led by Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, known as El Mencho, CJNG grew from a splinter group into a ferocious army. Their tactics were ruthless. Their expansion was rapid. Their message was simple: take everything, show no mercy. While Sinaloa moved like an old-world mafia, CJNG operated like a paramilitary. They built training camps in the jungles, armed their soldiers with rocket launchers, 50 caliber rifles, and military-grade drones, drove through towns in armored convoys marked with their initials, as if daring the government to react. And the message was always the same: submit or be destroyed. In Michoacán, Veracruz, Guanajuato, they didn't negotiate. They executed mayors, hung enemies from bridges, slaughtered police departments. They used social media as psychological warfare, posting videos of beheadings, torture, and their soldiers in black masks, chanting loyalty to El Mencho. It was terrorism disguised as trafficking. But they didn't just want territory. They wanted Sinaloa's throne, because the real war was for roots, the invisible highways of drugs flowing north into the U.S. Whoever controls the routes controls the fortune. And CJNG wasn't just moving in, they were invading. Cities once loyal to Sinaloa began flipping. Corrupt cops switched sides. Local gangs, sensing more money and more firepower, pledged to Mencho. In places like Tepalcatepec and Zacatecas, entire neighborhoods turned into battlegrounds. Bodies piled up, messages were left on corpses, and the government watched, helpless. The Sinaloa cartel couldn't sit still. Even fractured, they still had vast networks, experienced lieutenants, and deep pockets. And while El Chapo was gone, his sons, Los Chapitos, were not. They responded the only way they knew how, with blood. Hit squads were deployed. CJNG convoys were ambushed. Villages flipped back. Alliances formed with local cartels that once resisted Chapo. It wasn't just two cartels clashing. It was a chessboard of factions, betrayals, and shifting fronts. One of the deadliest battles happened in Caborca, a town near the U.S. border. CJNG tried to move in. Sinaloa responded with overwhelming firepower. Dozens died in one night. Civilians fled. The state did nothing. In Guadalajara, Mencho's home turf, Sinaloa-backed groups launched coordinated attacks. Explosives were used. Safe houses raided. In Tijuana, Nogales, Chihuahua, the pattern repeated. And every time a soldier fell, another took their place. It was no longer a cartel war. It was a proxy war for the soul of Mexico. The U.S. watched with growing concern, because the violence wasn't staying in Mexico. It was reaching California, Arizona, Texas, where both cartels operated distribution cells. CJNG began trafficking fentanyl in bulk, a synthetic opioid far deadlier than heroin, easy to produce, easy to ship, impossible to stop. Overdoses in the U.S. skyrocketed, more than 100,000 deaths in 1 year. And CJNG became public enemy #1 to the DEA. But Sinaloa didn't back down. They expanded their own fentanyl labs, used tunnels, couriers, shipping containers, and by 2023, the two cartels were producing enough fentanyl to kill every American, multiple times over. This wasn't just a war for power, it was a war fueled by poison. El Mencho, still at large, remained untouchable. Rumors said he was sick. Others said he was hiding in the jungle, surrounded by loyalists. Meanwhile, Los Chapitos kept building their legacy, with guns, meth, and corpses. The violence became relentless, and every time the government arrested a capo, another two stepped up. Because the truth was undeniable. This war had no end. Not while there was money to be made, not while the U.S. kept buying, not while corruption fed both sides. The people suffered the most. Towns emptied. Parents buried their sons. Children grew up between cartel checkpoints and gunfire. In many regions, the government didn't rule anymore. The cartels did. They decided who lived, who died, who disappeared. And in the smoke of this war, one reality was clear. El Chapo may be gone, but the war he helped build is more alive than ever. Two empires, one country, no rules. Mexico bleeds in the silence between their gunshots. They called him a monster, a genius, a ghost. They said he was the last of his kind, a relic from the days of Pablo Escobar, a kingpin too powerful to kill, too careful to catch. But in the end, they did catch him. They locked Joaquin El Chapo Guzman away in a Colorado prison, 23 hours a day in solitary confinement, his voice silenced, his empire shattered. And yet, the world he helped build? It's still standing. In many ways, El Chapo didn't just lead the Sinaloa cartel, he reshaped the entire drug trade. He pioneered the use of tunnels, some stretching for miles, outfitted with rails, lights, ventilation, allowing drugs to pass beneath the U.S.-Mexico border unnoticed. He modernized logistics, shifting operations from bulky cocaine to potent, lightweight fentanyl. He recruited engineers, chemists, financiers, turning a rural gang into a multinational enterprise. And most of all, he understood one unspoken law. Drugs can't be stopped, but they can be managed. And if you're smart, they can make you a king. Chapo wasn't the most violent. He wasn't the most educated, but he was the most adaptable. He survived betrayal, bribed presidents, escaped prison not once, but twice. Once through a laundry cart. Once through a mile-long tunnel dug beneath a maximum security shower. He didn't just evade capture. He made capture a temporary setback. And every time the state thought they had him cornered, he disappeared again. But nothing lasts forever. In 2016, Mexican Marines finally caught him for the last time. And this time, there would be no escape. In 2019, he stood in a Brooklyn courtroom, expressionless, as he was handed a life sentence plus 30 years. The jury found him guilty on all counts. The judge called him a man without a soul. And yet, even as they locked the door, they knew what he had built wouldn't end with a sentence. Because El Chapo didn't run a cartel. He ran a system. A machine designed to outlive any man. A web of corrupted institutions, hidden routes, and loyal killers. A business model based on addiction, impunity, and profit. Today, that system still thrives. His sons, Los Chapitos, now wage war for control. The Sinaloa cartel continues to traffic billions in drugs across borders. The violence in Mexico still surges. Fentanyl overdoses in the U.S. are higher than ever. The headlines have moved on, but his fingerprints are still on every kilo, every body, every bribe. So what is El Chapo's legacy? To some, he's a folk hero, a poor farmer's son who outsmarted the government, shared his wealth with villages, and became a symbol of power in a land that forgot its people. His face is on T-shirts. His name is whispered in corridos, narco ballads sung over beers and gunfire. But beneath that myth is a darker truth. El Chapo left behind thousands of corpses, millions of addicts, a nation scarred by fear. He didn't build a better Mexico. He just learned how to profit from its collapse. And yet, perhaps the most disturbing part of his legacy isn't what he did, but how much he got away with, how long he ruled, how many leaders he bought, how many soldiers, cops, judges, and bankers helped him, or looked the other way. El Chapo didn't corrupt the system. He exposed it. Now, in his 60s, Joaquin Guzman will likely die in prison, far from his mountains, his family, his throne. No phones, no sunlight, no more tunnels, just silence. But the silence he left behind is far louder. Because while they buried the man, they couldn't kill what he represented. A world where crime pays, as long as you're willing to kill for it. He's gone. But his shadow stretches across nations. Invisible, untouchable, eternal. The story doesn't end here. Hit like, subscribe, and step deeper into the world few dare to see.